In today's episode, we will discuss why Vladimir Putin, despite frequently issuing grave threats, knows very well that he cannot order the launch of nuclear weapons against Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and top members of his regime, like Dmitry Medvedev, do not hold back when they want to threaten Ukraine and the world with nuclear weapons. Threats that are often accompanied by practical actions, such as when Putin recently changed the Russian nuclear doctrine, greatly simplifying the use of these weapons. But despite limited Ukrainian invasions, like in Kursk and Ukrainian attacks on targets deep inside Russia, the red button remains untouched. But what exactly prevents Putin from ordering the use of a weapon that has the potential to guarantee victory in that war? Let's start with the context. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion in February 2022, Putin has used nuclear rhetoric as a psychological weapon. In his speeches, he mentions the Russian nuclear doctrine, which allows for the use of atomic weapons if the existence of the Russian state is threatened. Dmitry Medvedev, former president and current vice chairman of the Security Council, goes even further, threatening frequent nuclear apocalypse in Telegram posts if the West interferes too much. In 2024, following Ukrainian advances, Medvedev warned that the West is playing with fire and that Russia could respond with tactical nuclear weapons. But these threats are not new. And in September, in the year 2022, Putin raised the tone during Ukrainian counteroffensives, hinting at tactical use of nuclear weapons, which are less destructive, aimed at battlefields and not entire cities. Russia is known to possess a very advanced arsenal, older and modern nuclear weapons, especially tactical ones, with many installed in ballistic missiles, like the formidable Iskander, highly lethal for tactical deployment, and that have proven their efficiency in Ukraine. In 2024, with the Ukrainian incursion in Kursk, which began in August and continued until early 2025, analysts expected an escalation. Ukraine captured Russian territories, including villages near the Kursk nuclear power plant, an action that, according to Russian doctrine, could be responded to with the use of nuclear weapons. However, once again, Russia remained only in threats, leaving an important question hanging. Why? The main reason is that Putin knows that using nuclear weapons, even the tactical ones, and even on the battlefield, would have catastrophic consequences for Russia. In November 2024, Putin signed a complete revision of the Russian nuclear doctrine entitled Basic Principles of the State Policy of the Russian Federation on Nuclear Deterrence, dangerously lowering the threshold for the use of these weapons, giving Russia the freedom to respond with nuclear weapons to conventional attacks by a non-nuclear state, provided it is supported by nuclear powers. In other words, Ukraine, even though a non-nuclear state, could now be targeted with nuclear weapons because it is supported by nuclear powers. According to the new doctrine, Ukrainian attacks with missiles like the American ATACMS are now seen as threats that can be responded to with nuclear weapons. The previous doctrine from 2020 was much more restrictive, limiting the use of these weapons only against existential threats or prior use of nuclear weapons. This change of doctrine was a consequence of the brutal Russian losses on the battlefield with the Kursk operation. In January 2025, the nuclear risk increased with Ukrainian attacks against Russian early warning radars, like in Armavir, which could blind Moscow's nuclear defense. But despite all this and previous threats, Putin declared at the time that he does not need nuclear weapons to win in Ukraine. And in May 2025, he said in an interview that the necessity to use nuclear weapons had not arisen and hoped it would not arise, contradicting earlier statements made by him and top members of his regime. For experts, the deep changes in the Russian nuclear doctrine and Putin's narratives are more intimidation tactics than real intent, as Putin knows that the real use would destroy Russia's credibility as a rational power. In summary, the doctrine is a tool of deterrence, not action. Putin knows that using nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear Ukraine would be seen as conventional weakness, an admission that the Russian army failed, and failed badly, with estimated losses in hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Another crucial factor is China, with Xi Jinping, Putin's main ally, repeatedly warning that he will not accept the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. In July 2023, the Financial Times revealed that Xi personally warned Putin during a visit to Moscow, "Do not use nuclear weapons." In November 2022, Xi declared publicly that nuclear wars should not be fought and condemned nuclear threats in Europe and Asia. And in May 2024, in a joint statement with Putin, both said that there are no winners in a nuclear war. According to analysts, China fears global isolation. As Russia's economic and material partner, Beijing does not want to be dragged into harsher sanctions or a larger war. China has been supplying virtually all the parts and components for Russia to assemble drones and attack Ukraine. But it does not send lethal weapons ready for use precisely to avoid further sanctions and isolation. According to analysts, Xi Jinping sees the conflict as a proxy war against the West, which will become real if nuclear weapons are used. In 2024, the Kremlin denied reports of Chinese warnings, but sources confirm that Putin listens to Xi, as he depends on China to circumvent sanctions. And he knows that without Chinese support, Russia would be even more isolated and in a more serious economic situation. But beyond all this, there are also other reasons, with the main one being Putin's fear of portraying an image of desperation, as he knows that by using nuclear weapons, he would be admitting the conventional defeat of the Russian army against the Ukrainian army. Secondly, there is the fear of even further isolation, as he knows that nuclear weapons would alienate allies like India, China, and Turkey. And finally, there is also the internal factor, with Putin fearing that the use of nuclear weapons could cause internal instability, or even the start of mutinies among military units and commanders. In summary, Putin threatens to use nuclear weapons only to intimidate, as he knows that using them would destroy Russia's image as a conventional military power. It would be the admission that, mano a mano, the Russian army was unable to defeat the Ukrainian army. It's basically a calculated bluff, carefully contained by China. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any updates.